Remember the video we did last fall when we built our Fleahing pole and hide stretcher? If you're starting from scratch and need that DIY, head to the link up in the corner while we get to Fleahing. First, let's get this hide out of thaw. A little crunchy still, so we'll hang it to thaw in the open air for a bit. Don't know if you can see the snow falling, but we're coming out of a little bit of a false spring. Temperature fluctuating between 1 and 0 degrees Celsius, whatever that conversion is to Fahrenheit. And when we say that this is the Fleahing and tanning process for beginners in the title of our video, it's because we're right along there with you guys. But we've put in tens of hundreds of hours watching different YouTube videos, reading up and doing our research. When I was a kid, my father taught me how to skin by having me practice on deer hawks, as it was a way for me to practice separating the skin and fascia tissue without hurting the meat. Though it's definitely no bear hide, I've spent the winter going over the extended aspects of hide tanning, reaching back into the old hawking process of yesteryear and taking it a step further than I ever had before. I've put in the research and self-practicum, and I'm feeling secure. Stick around and we'll step by step you through it all, and we'll see how this turns out. First, you're going to start by removing all this excess gunk. Some cartilage here attached right by the tail. And we'll likely remove the tail for this as well. And the tail hole, like any other holes that might occur while Fleahing your subject, can be sewn up later with some bank line or some sinew or something like that. So you'll need to turn out the bone and cartilage in the tail. If you're planning on keeping the tail on your rug, if that's what you're making. It's just our first hide that we've ever done. So we're just doing whatever we can and taking advantage of what we have to get the practice down. Here we go. There's our tail. As you can see, we came pretty close right there. On this piece we chucked off. And we have just learning, being thankful for our first hole at least, given that it gave us the understanding of how deep the dermis is. Unfortunately, this being our first hide, we've gotten a few, so we're going to go through a bit of bank line before this thing is fully completed and on our sofa. Within all the research we were doing, we came across a couple of the different opinions regarding your Fleahing knife or draw knife. Some say to keep it medium dull. Others talk about it needing to be razor sharp. So we started with this, it being gifted from Wolf Dog, one of our loyal subscribers, and it had already been used on a couple coyote roadkills. So it wasn't exactly razor sharp, or, well, it's at the state that it's in now, which obviously could probably use some sharpening. So amongst some of our research, we came across a couple of videos on how to sharpen these guys. So let's go have a look. Basic whetstone and one of these kitchen sharpener guys. Make sure your knife is nice and clean. And you can just use your pant leg or whatever other rag that you might have kicking around. In this case, we've picked up some snow. You can see it's kind of saturating a little bit with whatever grease and dried blood and such that's on the hide. These Fleahing knives are just have one edge bevel on the one side and the other side's flat. So what you want to do, take your beveled side, lay it flat on one corner, tilt it to find the degree of your bevel, and just drag it along, trying to get the entire edge with each pass. The bevel is so deep that it's not hard to keep that degree as you go along. Once you've gotten to your preferred level of sharpness, just a quick pass on both sides with your kitchen steel to get off those little burls and curls that have probably accumulated. The thing I've read about and seen in other YouTube videos, and I'm experiencing now, is that when you're fleshing, you develop your own feel for it, which is why maybe some people prefer a duller edge. I'm definitely finding a sharper edge, not exactly razor at this point, is giving us a lot more traction as we push the flesh down and out to the sides of the hide. Already working up a sweat, and we only started back on this about 3 minutes ago after sharpening. Add to that, this guy was dispatched in the fall, right around the end of its hyperphagia, consuming around 20,000 calories per day in order to develop massive fat reserves regarding its up-and-coming hibernation that it never made it to. So we're a long way from those deer hawks that barely needed any fleshing at all, leaving us with something between a hefty workout and a serosanguious nightmare. You've found the angle you like, and you're keeping consistent hard pressure downwards. You're not going to tear a hole in this guy this way, at least most likely not. Just pushing all of that fat down to the edge. I'm putting a lot of pressure on this and then easing off as I get to the edge, because that area tends to be a little weaker and you don't want to come off and gouge your pole, dulling your knife. Gross little tag ends like this part here, you can flesh it all the way down and it'll clean it up. Or you could just cut that off. You probably will end up doing so anyway. It's just a little pinch. Remember that lunchroom scene in Mean Girls? Be sure to keep your blade clean of all this stuff in order to get a decent shaving without it binding up. If the hide starts to bulk up like this while you're scraping it, just go in and pull those hairs forward and down towards your pole, as creating that little bulky bump can snag your blade and put a hole in it. You also don't want to worry too much about all of this pinkish fat collecting on your edges. Once we get to stretching this guy, you're going to be punching holes anywhere between 1/2 inch and 1 inch in along here anyway, to string it up, lace it, stretch it out to dry. And then once the drying process, emulsification, scraping, all of that's done, you'll be cutting along your lacing holes anyway and losing all of this stuff to the rack. Once you think you're done, go back over everything. See if you can't remove some of this straggling flesh. Once you see the hair follicles kind of popping up like they are here from this side, you don't want to push it too much farther than that. Otherwise, you're going to get a tear like we have right in here. Again, being rather delicate around the holes, you can probably get some of that off, but don't stress too much, because once this is dried out on the frame that you've made, you'll get into the final scraping process before the actual application of emulsifier, and that'll get the rest of a lot of this gunk right off of here. But do whatever you can in order to get this residual fat off after the initial fleshing, in order to save yourself a little bit of effort when dry scraping. Till roughly 2 days later, and 40,000 calories burned. See what I did there? You're finished with the fleshing process, and you'll move on to soaping and rinsing the hide. We probably could have went a little bit further removing some of this fat beforehand, but this hide is a bit of a sacrifice to the learning process in order to be able to produce better ones in the future. You're either going to want to use a cool or lukewarm water for the washing process. In this case, we've decided to use a lukewarm process because bear, regardless of what time of year was dispatched, is chock full of fat. And trying to degrease some of that fat, what's been highly recommended in other videos and documentation is Dawn dish soap. Thing is that we're not only trying to degrease this hide, but as you can see, there's some dried blood patches on it somewhere. Maybe they've been worked out through the fleshing process, rubbing against the pole, but it's dirty. So we're gonna throw it in here, give it a good wash, rinse it, see where we're at, and see if we need to do a secondary follow-up wash. Yuck! The hide just barely touched it. And if you notice, the water went from pretty clear to this murkiness. Swish that up, get it nice and soapy. Chuck us in some bear hide. I feel like Kate Winslet's grandmother or whatever in Quills. Huh! Look at that brown water. Just breaking down the fat grease on the hide, as well as just getting some of that bear dirt out of there. This water's the legacy of a lifetime. Generally, after washing your hide, you're going to want to lace it up, stretch it on your frame that you've built, and start pushing the water out with a paddle or a chamfered stick, something like that, to avoid any mold or rot or slippage of the fur. But we lost our daylight. It being such a long day, we decided to get a little bit lazy. We poured some wine, built a fire, and I don't know how well it's going to translate on here, but we built this little ridiculous contraption. We've got a couple of 2x4s with a milk crate running. I don't know if you can see that we've got a fan hooked up on this side, blowing air through the milk crate. And we've got this end propped up, allowing the heat from the fireplace fan to transfer through and counter with some fanage coming from the other side. And it all drapes down into this Rubbermaid bin below, with it maintaining a steady 1 degrees, and it's supposed to go down to -2 tonight. We were going to need a fire inside anyway, so this conserves on our wood, not having to start one outside and run the stretcher in front of it and spend a bunch of time pushing out water. We'll see how this goes, and be sure to come back and check out part 3 of our Beginners Series Masterclass on how to mess up a bear hide. Until then, please like, comment, subscribe so you can get the notification of that video, and we'll see you guys next time. Thanks for watching.
They don't like us. They gotta like us.